Good evening. It's 7 o'clock. I'm going to call the public hearing to order. Will everyone please rise and pledge allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I'd like to welcome all of you this evening to the Board of Estimate and Taxation's public hearing on the budget. Thank you all for taking time out of your schedule to share with us your views on town spending and priorities. I'd like to spend a minute or two going through the procedures for this public hearing. There are sign-up sheets as you enter into the room for people just coming in. For those people who have already signed up, those sheets are being sorted by Town Controller Peter Minarski, who will also be keeping the clock. We're going to ask speakers to keep their remarks to 3 minutes. Mr. Minarski will let you know when you have 30 seconds left in your time. Speakers will be called to the podium by orientation of subject matter by BET clerk Beth Crumick, who's sitting here to my left, your right. And it would be very helpful for us and for our minute taker if you could clearly state your name and the subject on which you're speaking when you first approach the podium. This is a public hearing. It is for us to listen to you, and that is just a reminder to my colleagues that this is not for us to speak or to ask question. It is unfortunately not a dialogue, but an opportunity to listen. If any of you would like to speak to one or more BET individual members, please wait until after the hearing and approach them at the conclusion. That's it. So this budget process, many of you are well aware that the first selectman worked for many months with his town departments, other boards and commissions. The Board of Education worked to put together their recommended budget, which was then vetted by the BET Budget Committee through many hours of meetings and discussions, and it is now being presented to the full BET for consideration and vote on Monday. I'd like to take this opportunity to, in addition to thanking you for coming tonight, thanking all the hardworking staff in town who spent many, many hours both developing their budgets, performing the services, but also responding to all of our questions along the way. So thank you. And now I will turn the podium over to Ms. Crumick.
Hello. Our first speaker is Lorianne O'Donnell, and the second speaker will be Carol Sutton.
Hi, good evening. Lorianne O'Donnell, Chief Operating Officer for the Board of Education. I'm reading this on behalf of Peter Bernstein, Chairman of the Greenwich Board of Education. I'm sorry I cannot be with you in person, but we have a regularly scheduled meeting this evening with a very full agenda. I'm asking you to support the BOE budget request in the same bipartisan manner as our board did when we voted unanimously to adopt this budget. Regardless of your political affiliation, we can all agree that strong schools attract new families to our community and keep property values high. By all measures, our students and schools are quite successful. Just last month, we were, we ranked as the 4th best district on the state's 2016-2017 Next Generation Accountability System, up from 6th last year. This puts us in the 98th percentile of all schools in Connecticut. 8 of our elementary schools were designated as schools of distinction. Even with that success, we feel there is more work to do as we continue our focus on student growth and personalized learning. It is important to remember that our budget on the operational side is a planning document as much as it lays out financial need. Budget development began before our current budget was approved by the RTM. Staff is our largest expense, and the number of elementary sections and teachers needed for middle and high school are determined by staffing models set by the board's educational policies. While the BET budget guidelines presume no new net positions, the guidelines specifically stated it was based on the following. School enrollment is assumed to be essentially unchanged, but school enrollment has changed in an appreciable way. It is not just a change in the number of students that matters, but what schools and grades those students are in. For next year, we are seeing a larger than normal increase at the middle schools and high school from advancing students, resulting in a need for additional staffing. At the same time, there's a slight decrease at the elementary level. That decrease is spread throughout all grades at our 11 elementary schools and does not appear to affect the overall number of sections, given that there are increases at some schools and decreases at others. We will continue to refine projections as we get closer to the next school year. The superintendent had recommended additional administrative positions, but the board did not accept that proposal despite a strong case. Instead, our focus is on what happens in the classroom. Even with the staffing changes, we managed to bring in an overall budget within 0.1% of the BET guideline. In terms of our capital budget, we need to protect our buildings by properly maintaining them. You heard from the KG&D architectural firm during our day with the Budget Committee that the replacement value of our buildings is approximately $1 billion. This year's capital request represents the bridge forward to our master facility plan. The board will hear the architect's preliminary proposal on April 5th, so we can begin to prioritize for items such as health, safety, and ADA compliance. As partners in that process, we ask that you help us ensure our buildings meet the educational needs of today and for years to come. Thank you for your continuing support of the Greenwich Public Schools, which you can further demonstrate by voting to support our budget request. An investment in our students and our schools is an investment in the present and the future of Greenwich. Thank you.
Following Carol Sutton will be Claire Kilgallen.
Good evening, Ms. Oberlander and members of the BET. My name is Carol Sutton, and I'm honored to represent over 900 members of the Greenwich Education Association. These are the employees who expend their time and talent every day to make the Greenwich Public Schools one of the best systems in the country. In educational terms, the teachers are assets, the warp and weft that provide structure to the town's educational fabric. I'm here this evening to implore you to support the Board of Education's budget for 2018-19. First, be assured that Dr. Gilday, who's won awards for her budgeting acumen in her home state of Illinois, built a budget based on the educational needs of the district next year and in the years to come. Her team sought efficiencies and value and provided sound rationale for each budget line. The board made the team sweat for every dollar before approving the proposal unanimously. Yes, the proposal exceeds your guideline by 0.1%, but for sound educational reasons. Next, your guideline said no new headcount. Discounting the 11.3 additional teachers to address increasing enrollment, that is exactly what the BOE budget does. It includes no new security guards, no new curriculum coordinators or facilities managers, despite demonstrated need. It has no new assistant deans at Greenwich High School, even though these 5 individuals have literally saved student lives this year. And there will be no new social workers, even though our social worker to student ratio is 300% above the federal guideline. Greenwich is a respected school system because it has established strict class size guidelines in elementary school and because it maintains soft caps at the secondary level. The 11.3 headcount ask maintains the status quo. That's it, and is based on sound education policy. On the fiscal side, additional teachers do not equal additional pension liability for the town of Greenwich, since the town does not contribute to our pensions, at least not yet. And to malign additional headcount for the increased health care cost is absolutely disingenuous. Even if every teacher purchases town-sponsored health care, it will never approach the long-term savings to the town that moving to the state plan has brought about. On the balance sheet, the savings shows up as a one-time savings, but the savings will continue for years to come. And that's what we were told and the town accepted at the negotiating table. So the budget before you is a working document, not a wish list. The administration and the board built the budget based on educational factors and fiscal responsibility, and it was passed unanimously. On behalf of the GEA and the teachers who make up the GEA, I implore you to exercise bipartisanship the same way the Board of Ed did and pass this budget. Thank you.
Following Claire will be Dina Murphy.
Good evening, Claire Kilgallen, New Lebanon PTA. I just wanted to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak and have you reflect on that before your vote on Monday. And really, I just have general ideas. The first thing is, I am in full support, and our school is, and our community is in full support of our superintendent's first budget. And I think it's important, just like Dr. Cordes spoke in the May RTM meeting, it's important to give the superintendent the tool she needs to be successful. And the tool she needs to be successful is to work with her. And she was handed, this budget is her attempt to do what the students need, and it's not everything she wanted to be. That's actually, there are at least 25 things that didn't make it into this budget that she thought were fundamental things, and I was at the meeting where she said there are 25 fundamental things that did not make it into this budget. Regarding the head count on the students, to me it's akin to, you can't control for students coming into the school system. That's just the way it works. So you have a baseline. This is no different than, a law department that has litigation that comes in. You try to predict for something, and then stuff comes in and you have to deal with it. And we have a duty to our over 9,000 students to educate them appropriately and to help them develop to their best of their ability. So you can, just the process of the way students come in after a budget's developed, there are going to be things that happen, and I don't think 0.1 is a failing grade by any means. I think that's as close as you can get to where you need to be. More generally, in terms of, my concern is more about deferring projects. Deferring projects, deferring investment in students. Students are only in the school at one time. They're only in first grade once. To miss the opportunity to give them what they need because you want to delay that for 2 more years, or to take a field that isn't going to be fixed because we don't want to spend the money to get that field rehabilitated so these students can participate and get engaged and do something that maybe they never thought of in terms of sports and, connect with something. There could be a student there who isn't engaging in a program that can help them physically, mentally, because the facilities aren't there for them to participate in such a program or a sport. And it's been well known that the state of the fields are what they are, because Drew Marzullo spoke about this a few years ago, saying that we should look at a methodical plan of looking at every single field, et cetera, et cetera. So we've known this for a long time coming, and this town is prudent, and everybody on this BET has planned well, and I don't think we should stop projects, because something like a New Lebanon, where you've had $8 million come in already, should be actually an encouragement that you are able to move forward with projects, and you don't need for everything to stop and start one right after the other. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker after Dina will be Gregory Lard.
Good evening. My name is Dina Murphy, and I'm here speaking on behalf of Eastern Middle School's Executive Board of the PTA. I know tonight you're going to hear a lot of different perspectives on the proposed BOE budget and the proposed staff increases. And I understand these staff increases are a point of concern for some of the BET members, as well as others in the community. And really, we're here just to say a very simple message. Enrollment in students have only increased at the high school and the middle school, and that is nowhere more true than at Eastern. These proposed staff increases are not only needed, but crucial to our ever-growing population and to the teacher-staff ratio that's been recommended by the Board of Ed. The Board of Ed and the superintendent have put very hard work, long hours, and a very creative thought process into these recommendations. And it is their best judgment we need to rely on when making the kinds of decisions that directly impact our students in schools. Without this increase in headcount, the support we can offer our students will no doubt be compromised, and the quality and education we offer our students now will suffer. Because of a Board of Ed meeting that's being hosted at Eastern Middle School tonight, not everyone who wanted to be here from Eastern's board could. But I am here on behalf of all of our executive board to state that this is an issue that is very concerning to all parents in our community. We ask the BET to trust what the Board of Ed has recommended and to vote for this budget as is, as this is what will best serve our students, our schools, and our facilities. We thank the BET for their time, for listening, and for all the work that you do to ensure that we are optimizing our budgets in the most efficient and advantageous way possible. Thank you.
Kathleen Yu will be after Gregory.
My name is Gregory Large. I'm here speaking on behalf of my wife, Abby Large, and who is an active RTM member. I have firsthand knowledge in two fronts. Number one, being a spouse, supporting someone that commits the amount of time that I know that the BET, the Board of Ed, and all fellow RTM members put in to make the smart decisions that have been put in front of you. I'm also here as a father and a coach that volunteers their time at the high school and supporting those individuals that spend a tremendous amount of time with the future leaders of our town and our country in the high school that we have. I want to say that I've seen also firsthand the position Ms. Gilday has been put in taking over the school system that we should be also proud of on the things that we've heard. One thing that I constantly see is that we get lost sometimes in the weeds of the discussions that we have, and we lose sight of the fact that there are children there, 3 of them being my own, that are affected by the decisions that we all make. Those individuals have no say or no knowledge, but we are the adults that make the informed decisions to help and benefit them in their schooling here in this community. I'm proud to be a resident of the Greenwich community. I'm proud to see the outcomes of the efforts that we all make on behalf of our children. And I hope that we can also, as a leader of a business myself with over 500 employees and understanding the difficulties of the budgeting process, and there's never a right answer. There's only the answer that we all come together as one to say that we will follow and support. And we support those leaders in the positions that they are in to help facilitate their ability to do their jobs. So I'm here to basically ask to support the Board of Ed decision on the budget that's been presented, to support our students that represent the interests of our community, represent the interest of our state, and also eventually I think we can take firsthand from some students that graduated from our high school most recently that might be representing the interests of our country. Thank you.
Following Kathleen will be Janet Stone McGuigan.
Good evening. My name is Kathleen Yu. I'm going to try to make an effort not to reiterate some of the points that have already been raised this evening. For the record, I am the co-president at Western Middle School, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the entire Western Middle School PTA Executive Board. While we realize that the current financial climate in our state warrants an eye for careful and measured decisions, the outlined staff increases are absolutely necessary and are commensurate with an increase in student numbers within the middle and high schools. These additions follow the board's guidelines and are integral to maintaining a necessary level of support for the students within our district. Projected school enrollment numbers for the 18-19 school year show an overall increase at the middle and high school level that would justify the increase, while also showing a minor decrease in elementary school enrollment. However, the elementary figures are spread out across our 11 elementary schools, as you know, and would not support a reduction in head count under the current class size guidelines. We would also urge the BET to support the 15-year master facility plan, which addresses the health, safety, and security of our students, as well as bringing our aging facilities up to code. We stand behind the Board of Ed in support of the Cardinal Stadium plan and all fields, which are used not just by our school community, but by numerous other town-wide entities and groups. They are a reflection of the community that they serve. We appreciate the hard and creative work put forth by the Board of Ed this budget season, and we hope that the BET tonight honors and supports this proposed budget. Thank you for your time.
Following Janet will be Harry Fisher.
Good evening. My name is Janet Stone McWiggin, and I am the first VP of the Greenwich PTA Council. Thank you for the opportunity to provide input tonight. PTAC asks that you vote to approve the Board of Education budgets as submitted and as unanimously approved by the BOE. There would be more parents in attendance tonight, but our membership is divided between this meeting and the BOE's regular business meeting. Recognizing that there's no perfect time to schedule a public meeting, PTAC respectfully requests that the BET consult the calendars of the other governing bodies of Greenwich before scheduling a meeting as important as this one. In a letter to the editor of the Greenwich Time, a number of BET members expressed concern about an increase in headcount in the proposed BOE budget, as well as an overage in busing costs this year. PTAC understands the concern about headcount. However, Ms. O'Donnell has already noted projected enrollment for next year does not remain the same. State statute gives jurisdiction to the BOE to decide on educational policy and headcount, and PTAC respectfully asks that the BOE be allowed to make this calculation. To not build the projected enrollment changes into the proposed budget would be poor management. What is clear to PTAC is that without this increase in headcount, the excellence in education Greenwich provides for its students will be compromised. Ms. Sutton has already noted that the BOE already removed from the proposed budget 7 positions identified as high priority: 4 assistant academic deans at the high school and 3 curriculum area administrators. A project manager position was left in, but those who understand project management have said that this position will pay for itself. PTAC also understands the concern about busing expenses. It is easy to say that busing does not impact the quality of education, but what gets lost in this discussion is that ridership is up, and with that, traffic congestion goes down. Please note, the busing system also experienced a number of changes this year beyond a change in start time. PTAC thanks the BET for its patience as the district continues to optimize and find efficiencies. As the BET moves to a vote, PTAC reiterates its support for the BOE operating and capital budgets as proposed. Our superintendent, Dr. Jill Gilday, may be new to the district, but she is not new to budgets. Prior to coming to Greenwich, Dr. Gilday won national recognition for her budget-building talents. In agreement with the BOE, Dr. Gilday is holding off on a budget process redesign. Starting before her official arrival, she has taken the time to listen and learn. But Dr. Gilday is not offering a menu of what she thinks parents, students, and teachers want. In collaboration with our equally talented Board of Education, she has created a comprehensive vision of what she believes our district needs. PTAC advocates for the education of the whole child, and the Master Facilities Plan is a step in the right direction and should guide the creation of future capital budgets. Even as the entire community enjoys the benefits of the high school's beautiful new Performing Arts Center, it is clear that Greenwich lacks quality regulation playing fields and that our aging facilities, including Cardinal Stadium, need attention to address health, safety, and security concerns. School facilities are used not just by the school community, but by numerous other town groups. Our public school system and its facilities reflect Greenwich. An investment in them is necessary investment in both our students' education and in our town. Thank you.
Stephen Meskers will follow Harry.
Good evening. I'm Harry Fisher, a former vice chair of the BET, and appreciate all that you do for the town, except for this thing. A bigger job today than it was 20 years ago. First, I would like to endorse the position stated by the Republicans in the op-ed piece published recently, both regarding spending and personnel limits, and the ill-advised proposal to expand borrowing authority. With an over-leveraged state of Connecticut, that really is a bad idea at this time. It also risks operational costs to manage the increased scope of projects it would fund, and we already have a backlog today of projects in the pipeline. Our capability is at capacity. Please do not blow up the tax rate by adding to it. In regard to education, I submit that the Board of Ed is doing a lousy job in 2 important areas. One is planning and executing projects. There are numerous examples, but the most obvious is New Lebanon. That school project should have been completed years ago. The need was obvious a decade ago at least. Thankfully, a Republican is leading the building committee and doing a great job now. But due to inane state policies, we are building a school too large for the neighborhood. The old adage will not work. Just building it will not give it a magnetic attraction. The second area where the BOE is failing is special education, especially at the high school level. I speak from direct experience. My case against the town on behalf of my daughter was decided by a judicial decision, so I'm not bound by confidentiality, except as regard a subsequent settlement due to a defective decision. I appealed that decision and the town quickly settled, apparently on the advice of outside counsel. If the town had offered, at the time we withdrew her from Greenwich High School, to pay 1/2 of her tuition for 2 years of the Greenwich Education Group, I would have accepted the offer, gratefully. The direct cost of the judicial decision for 1 year of tuition plus my legal costs exceeded the full tuition for 1 of her two years there, obviously. The indirect costs and subsequent settlement drove the cost to the town's taxpayers much higher. The problem is that the solutions offered anyone with special needs at Greenwich High School are designed to dumb down the instruction in order to get the student over the finish line to graduation. The result is that the student is denied a free, appropriate public education, with emphasis on the word appropriate. Again, I have direct experience, as do many parents. An associated problem is I had the resources to take on the town in an expensive legal matter. Many parents do not have that luxury, so they are doubly disadvantaged. The BOE does not need more personnel, it needs better personnel. And a good place to start is the department in Havemeyer that drives the special education bus into a crack-up every year, costing the taxpayers millions of dollars in legal costs that could better serve the educational needs of the students who are disadvantaged by a lousy system. Thank you for your time.
Marita Hamre will follow. Mr. Meskers.
Good evening, members of the BET. My name is Stephen Meskers. I'm Vice Chair of Education on the RTM. I've served on education, I believe, somewhere between 12 and 14 years. I can't quite remember. It's been a long time. I just have a couple of observations to make. I think poor Leslie has borne the brunt of them at different times when she sat on the Board of Ed. And the first observation is that when we look at the town facilities, there are 3 facilities that stick out in my mind currently: Town Hall, the Police Department, and the Fire Department. All buildings, this one probably the oldest of the 3, the best, all magnificently maintained. I would question whether the resources are dedicated there for the school system yet. I think when you look at both the physical structures and you look at the landscaping and the maintenance, I think they need some work. And I would recommend that we take some effort there. Apart from that, I think we've already spoken to the issue about classroom size in the issue of the head count, and I think that those are important issues across the board. And I would caution anyone to suggest that we increase head count at any of the schools in the system. I think you'll get a very adverse reaction from the populace. I think our Board of Ed, as opposed to the last commentary, has done a very good job over the last couple of years, both under Democratic leadership and under Republican leadership, to balance the issues that we face. In regards to the last article or the editorial in the newspaper, there's no question that we're suffering a drive of 5, 6, 7% in medical costs, that human resource costs are going in only one direction, they're going up. When you look at the education in the public system, where I think our expenses are somewhere on the order of $15,000 a year, that may not cover all of the buildings, et cetera, versus private school education that's running on the order of $45,000 a year, which is more of an all-in cost. I think you have to look at the quality of the system you want to deliver to the existing taxpayers and to future residents of the town, because the only way I'm getting out of this town is either they're carrying me out or someone's buying my house. And I think it's important that we take those things into consideration, since I'm hoping to move before I die. Thank you.
After Maretta, it'll be Maria Morell and Ann Fish. Hello, my name's Marita Hamry. I'm speaking as a resident and as a parent of 2 children who went through the public schools and went on to college. They were extremely well prepared in their college experience because of their public education here. I know there's been a lot of talk about focusing on efficiency and productivity by our town and specifically by our schools, and a lot of that tends to focus very specifically on the cost side and solely on the cost side. So I would like to point out ways in which our schools in particular have become more efficient by producing more. And since we moved here and my kids started school here, the schools have taken on vastly more responsibilities in our community and for our children. And I'm just going to highlight a few of the ways in which our schools are doing vastly more than they used to be. First of all, the obvious is digital learning. They are teaching our children to be savvy and safe users of the digital environment. They're learning to integrate digital resources into their learning. And they're learning how to be safe on the internet. That is coming from our teachers. That is coming from a sound education policy from Havemeyer and from our school board. And I would like to thank you for our town for taking that on. That makes all of us safer. It makes our community stronger and sounder. In a similar regard, the social and emotional learning aspect that our schools have taken on, particularly lately, has been phenomenal. That is what is keeping our kids safe, and that is what is keeping our schools safe, much more than installing equipment and safety equipment, which I'm not opposed to that, but much more effective is making sure that our children are known by their teachers, that they have guidance counselors and social workers who know them so that they are not left on the fringes. That is what is going to keep our children safe. And that is done by having a low student-teacher ratio, by staffing our schools with psychologists and social workers who know them and can identify when children are losing touch with their community and with their schools. Also, the positive behavioral intervention system, which is part of that system, has been a great way of creating a positive culture at our schools and teaching children by using positive norms and showing them positive behaviors that we want our children to exemplify. At the same time, the high school has doubled the number of AP courses that are being taken, the number of AP tests that are being taken. They have doubled in the last 10 years the number of college courses basically being taken at the high school. At the same time, they have maintained the scores that are well above the national average. So the scores have not come down while the number of AP courses being taken has doubled. 30 seconds. Thank you. Communication with parents, having a website that is continually updated with content and also means of parents keeping track of their children's education has been another tool to increase our education. So I would just like to say, rather than focusing exclusively on the bottom line cost, also look at what is coming on the output, which I believe, and what is being put in by teachers and our school district, which has been phenomenal, and it has increased vastly since we moved here 18 years ago. Thank you.
Wendy Forley after Maria and Ann.
Hi, my name is Maria Merrill, and I am here with Ann Fetch. We are the co-presidents of the Greenwich High School PTA. We are here tonight to speak in support of the Board of Education's proposed 2018-19 budget, and we ask the BET to approve this budget as proposed. The requested small increase in headcount supports our children continuing to receive a world-class education. The demographic projections show a shift in enrollment increases into middle and high schools. However, the small drop in elementary school enrollment does not warrant a cut in headcount. The Board of Education follows class size guidelines, and in order to maintain our class sizes, we need to maintain our headcount in the elementary schools. A drop of 1 to 2 students per grade per elementary school would not warrant shutting down a whole section and thus eliminating a full-time employee. We also strongly support immediate and important capital expenditures which have been deferred year after year. Cardinal Stadium has long been neglected. The bleachers are in major disrepair, and there are 0 bathroom facilities and no accessibility for the handicapped. The stadium needs to be addressed. Likewise, the locker rooms at Greenwich High School are in awful condition and have never been updated. The toilet areas are in disrepair, the showers are structured in a group format not conducive for today's teens, and the boys' locker room has a serious and odious plumbing issue. We invite any and all of you to tour these facilities. They are a real eye-opener. Finally, I think we can all agree that our town has a need for more playing fields for our children and better quality fields. We support the renovation of the Central Middle School fields and the proposed expenditures to update and maintain the fields at Greenwich High and other schools. There is no reason why Greenwich's fields and our children should not have the opportunity to engage in outdoor sports at the same level of frequency and quality of all of our neighboring towns. Greenwich has some catch up to do in order to bring our quantity and quality of fields up to a satisfactory quality. Our town is falling behind in the maintenance of our school facilities, and it not only hurts our children, but also the real estate values in Greenwich. We need to support investments into our schools that we have deferred for too long. Now is the time to support our new superintendent and vote to support the Board of Ed's unanimously approved proposed budget. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Nerlin Pearson after Wendy.
Hi, I'm Wendy Force. I'm sorry, I don't, handwriting's on. And I'm a resident and a parent of a child who's.
Can you bring the mic down, please?
And I'm short, there. And a parent of a student who's gone through special ed right up from, I guess, first, second grade. I hadn't planned on talking, but I really want to kind of go with what this gentleman said before. I think, just to give you an understanding of what I've been through, it's a battle with special ed. Now, one of the meetings I had in an IEP, I guess they changed the way they structured it. And I've always had to have an advocate. I've always had to fight for everything my son has gotten. He's had some great teachers. He's had some advocates who said, look, I can't tell you this or I'm going to get in trouble, but this is what he needs. That shouldn't be. But thank God he had teachers who really, kind of knew the rules. We sat in this meeting, and the special ed monitor, this is what she said. She said the role of special ed is to exit your child. Is to exit your child, and that's the problem. And that's what she said, and the advocate said, did you hear that? And I said, I heard it. So it's to try and get these kids out so they're not paying the extra money. If they got more special ed teachers in there, they'd probably lower the cost of $5 million for outplacement. And I'm sure I know that there's a lot of legal battles going on with parents trying to just get what they need for their kids. So my son has done really well. I've had to pay extra money outside to get what he needed. Social worker, she was, especially in high school, was between 3 schools. I mean, you can't really understand your kid, and it's really, I think special ed needs to be really, really looked at carefully. You probably lower your costs. You'd have a lot less problems with parents coming back after going through legal, which is what you did. And it would be a much better outcome for your kids. But that was what we were told. The role of special ed is to exit your children, not to teach them. So that's all I need to say. I think that kind of says it all.
Thank you.
Sharon Suno will be after Nerlin Pearson.
Hi, thank you for giving me a chance to speak. My name's Nerlin Pearson. I am co-chair of the PTAC Health and Wellness Committee, as well as have 2 children in the public school system at North Street. And I just wanted to come in and speak and ask that you please support the proposed budget by the Board of Ed and Dr. Gilday. I feel strongly that the budget that was proposed is something not of what we as parents or teachers want, but it's really based on what we need in order to continue to have what I think is an excellent public school system. One of the reasons I moved to town 7 years ago was because of the public school system. And I think that's one of the pride and joys of this town. And I do think that if we start looking to cut that budget and eat into the public schools, then we lose a little bit of what Greenwich is, and we lose what it's about. And it's about our kids and providing them the best services that we can. So I ask that you please accept that budget without any changes. Thank you.
Mary Lee Kiernan will be after Sharon.
Good evening. My name is Sharon Sanu, and I'm a registered Republican, and I have lived in Greenwich for almost 20 years. I believe in fiscal responsibility, hard work, entrepreneurial spirit, and a great education. I don't believe in big government meddling in the lives of workers, families, and companies. Many decisions should be kept at the state and local level, which is why I am here today. I want to express my strong support for the education budget that you are voting on. I have one child who had already gone through our great school system from kindergarten, and he finally graduated last year. And I have another that is a junior at Greenwich High School. I'm here to say to our local decision makers that now more than ever, public education is critical to the future of any town, even Greenwich. Discussions about attracting business, excuse me, reviving Greenwich Avenue are excellent, but should not be the main point of what makes this town excellent for families who wish to live here for the long term. Discussions in this town should be about our students, all 9,000 of them, and their families and their needs. Their needs include, excuse me, great teachers, administrators, while building excellent facilities for these hardworking people. Families are making decisions on where to live based upon how good a school district is and how students are treated. We are ranked 4th in the state for good reason. We have done a great job. You all have done a great job. Thus far, any attempt to try and undermine the district's effort to deliver the highest levels of education is a mistake because it is short-sighted. It will absolutely hurt the long-term development of Greenwich. Many of you are having conversations about the capital projects for this district. And the word safety is being used regularly when we talk about students and schools. With thousands of people living in working and being in a building that has only one entrance and one exit, just pause and think what that actually means. The stadium revamping plan incorporates a second entrance and exit to that building. And I would consider you to think about that when there's contemplation about waiting for other capital projects to be completed before contemplating this particular issue. My last point, I do believe this town is at a tipping point with education in its future. We have a real opportunity to bring even better education to this town with the solid leadership of our new superintendent, Dr. Gilday, who comes from one of the best performing districts in the country, let alone in the state of Illinois. We are not living in the sorry story of public education in the 60s and 70s with soaring spending and plummeting test scores. I lived through that in Southern California, and I was a public school student there. Greenwich is far from that. Finally, I do believe that the administration is not asking for much, actually. They have given up certain budget items, but I do think we need more leadership here instead of gatekeepers. Have you looked into public-private partnerships for some of these capital projects?
Time is up.
Thank you.
Meredith Gold will follow Mary Lee Kiernan.
Good evening. Mary Lee Kiernan, CEO of the YWCA Greenwich. Thank you for all the hard work that you are putting into the fiscal 19 budget. Tonight I'm here to speak about domestic violence, which is the #1 violent crime in this community and has been for some time. 1 in 4 girls and women will experience physical violence from an intimate partner in her lifetime. So I'm here to advocate for the funding in the Department of Human Services budget for both YWCA violence prevention education in the Greenwich Public Schools, as well as the funding for YWCA domestic abuse services for victims. Funding for the violence prevention education piece is an initiative of the First Selectman begun in fiscal 18 and proposed again for fiscal 19. The YWCA has provided age-appropriate violence prevention education to the Greenwich Public School System at no cost for 20 years, starting with the YNET program at the high school. And currently, the YWCA's licensed clinical staff provide violence education to all 3 middle schools, to all 6th and 8th graders in their health classes. And we run the Girls Circle program at all 3 middle schools. We facilitate the YNET program at Greenwich High School, which impacts the larger high school population throughout the year. And the YWCA has also taught the Safe Dates program at the alternative high school, and we will provide updated programming at Winrose this spring. The YWCA finally has been teaching a CDC-approved curriculum called Second Step to the youngest New Lebanon students during an after-school program at Bank since 2013. This specialized education is provided by trained clinical staff who deliver age-appropriate curriculum to specific audiences. We conduct outcome measurement and continually improve our curriculum and our pedagogy. These programs are separate from the other services that the YWCA provides to the community around domestic abuse. And as I've explained to you before, we're the only organization in town that provides services to victims of relationship violence, including teenagers and the elderly. And these services range from our 24-hour hotline to emergency response with the police, counseling from crisis to recovery. We shelter victims off-site, and we provide court advocacy and testimony for our victims at Stamford Superior Court. And I'm proud to tell you that our staff now debriefs and trains with members of the Greenwich Police Department at roll call every other week. This is a new initiative. We have small group conversations that help police officers better understand the clinical issues and the dynamics of domestic violence calls, which are among the most dangerous that police can respond to in any community. Let me close by also asking for your support for the Department of Human Services budget. 10 years ago, there were 30 full-time equivalents in that department. Today, there are 20. Dr. Barry has done an excellent job of streamlining and modernizing this department during a period when needs in the community have increased. He's aligned the allocations to community partners with data from the United Way, Greenwich Hospital, the RTM Health and Human Services Committee, the CDBG Committee, and the knowledge of the Board of Human Services. And he's aligned all these efforts with a sound departmental strategic plan. So thank you very much for your support of these essential YWCA programs and the work of the Department of Human Services. Thank you.
We will have Katie Nugan after Meredith Gold.
Good evening, and thank you, committee. I am Meredith Gold, the Director of Domestic Abuse Services at the YWCA Greenwich, and I'd like to offer our support of the budget for the Department of Human Services and tell you a little bit more specifically about the work we're doing in Greenwich Public Schools. So the YWCA is committed to responding to incidents of domestic violence and providing services to victims, but we are also committed to stopping violence before it starts. And as has been proven through prevention campaigns such as drunk driving, we know the key to prevention is youth and our young people. At Greenwich High School, the YWCA sponsors a club called YNET, where students are trained to be experts in teen dating violence in order to raise awareness, educate their peers, counsel their peers, and guide them to safe intervention. YNET is also a youth leadership program where students are empowered to emerge as leaders while taking action for a cause that's important to them. At all 3 public middle schools in Greenwich, we implement 2 distinct programs. Our team meets with each 8th grade health class for 3 sessions to introduce the topic of healthy and unhealthy dating relationships. The goal isn't to scare these kids and students, but in actuality, students in middle school can already identify examples of abusive behavior between dating partners. Many examples they've seen between their friends, and sadly, all too often what they've seen at home. For 6th graders, the team meets with each class for 2 sessions and explores relationships in a broader context. Also, at the 3 middle schools is our Girls Circle program. It's an evidence-based, best practice curriculum aimed to reduce risk factors for girls while increasing protective factors such as confidence, positive decision-making, and conflict negotiation. At the Bank After School program, the YWCA education team meets once a week throughout the entire school year with first through third graders to implement Second Step. They're taught specific skills on topics like feelings identification, impulse control, and empathy. The YWCA team has also implemented workshops on bullying, teen dating violence, and sexual consent for several of our athletic teams and coaches at the high school, including football, cheerleading, and baseball, as well as for the grade-specific assemblies that take place throughout the year. I'd like to emphasize the consistency and the cohesion created by the same education team repeating the same message in age-appropriate ways from year to year and setting to setting. And it's not just any team. It's crucially important that this content be delivered by licensed and trained domestic violence professionals in order to increase the likelihood of students coming forward for help and to have the experts right there on the scene with no delay when they do. And they do come forward. The YWCA's primary goal of our education programs is prevention. And as Mary Lee mentioned, 25% of women will experience domestic violence at some point during her lifetime. And young people between the ages of 16 and 24 are at the greatest risk for abuse. The work that we are doing with the youth in our community is potentially life-saving as we support them to navigate and learn how to handle their relationships. We thank you for your support. Thank you.
Arthur Yee will follow Katie Nugent.
Switching gears a little bit. My name is Katie Galbraith Nogaki. I live at 219 Orchard Street in Cos Cob. I'm here tonight to ask you to take the feasibility study for Central Middle School off the table at this time. I live at 219 Orchard with an 11-year-old that will start Central in the fall, twin 9-year-olds and a 2-year-old baby. I've spoken at the P&Z meetings, BOE meetings, with Peter Tessie alone or with a colleague or friend, and I'm here back again. I have spoken and I will keep speaking. You see, I'm that lady that lives 233.7 feet from your proposed field, your supposed maybe turf, maybe bubble, but also from those high school students, those with cars, those that drive, those that have hormones, those that are different than middle school students. My family also loves sports. My children are on way too many sports teams. And this town needs more fields. We need turf fields. We believe in the importance of creating more safe, reliable spaces for children to practice, to play, to sweat, and to exercise. But this is not the right place for it. See, in the fall, as my 6th grader walks for the first time to Rinaldi's Deli, he will experience real, yet guided freedom. These will all have to change if 200 high school students are using that field. It's their space. Where will the middle schooler teams practice? What is your plan around their needs? Remember, these are the same kids that will one day be the quarterback for your varsity football team, the goalie on your soccer team, and the center for field hockey. In the fall, my son will have to be bused literally across the street because there's no way for him to get from our house. We are the closest house to the school. We are the first family to live in the house to have a child go to that school. There's no sidewalk, there's no curb, there's no path, there's no street light. 233.7 feet from this field. I bring this up because where and how are all these cars going to go? I bought this house as our forever house. We're here to stay. It's been a joy to get to know our neighbors, the culture of Cos Cob, the strength of the community. But we are also learning quickly about the traffic, the cars lining up in front of our home, waiting to pick up kids at 3:15. Where will these cars and buses and high school cars go when practices are from 3 to 7? And let's be real, it could go to 3 till 9 at night. This is no place for cars. You'll see if you come down there. Kids will get hurt trying to walk home and to and from school. The speed of the cars that pass my home is fast, and it is unnerving. It is not safe. It is loud, very loud. You've heard me before express noise concerns, light concerns, and how both have impacted my family at home, during dinner, or trying to put a baby to sleep.
but there are safety issues that the high schoolers mixing with middle schoolers. Again, 233 feet from this field, it is dark, really dark, and there's no lights. Right now, as middle school fields are not rented on the weekends, we have 2 days off where there's no noise. As soon as you bubble or turf this or both, you will rent this out to the highest bidder. Some of my children play on many others of these fields, but where does this end? You will keep these fields open day and night if it's lit or bubbled. 30 seconds. Oh, it's a big sign. But we did not buy a house with traffic sports on the weekends. We did not know that. And we are real people living in a real community. We thank you for all you do for our real children, but please understand that this is not in the best interest of our children. Let's work together to find long-term solutions. As I've heard, the high school stadium really needs some help. Population's growing for these kids, and the solutions, this is critical time, and let's not put a Band-Aid by moving that issue over to our neighborhood. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Erica Smith will follow Arthur Yee.
Good evening. I think a lot of you know me already. I've been to literally every public town meeting regarding this issue of the turfing and lighting of the Central Middle School issue. I've been a resident of Orchard Street and then Coachland Lane for the past 30 years and a Greenwich resident for the past 50 years. I am here tonight to speak against funding the feasibility study of the Central Middle School athletic fields. As I mentioned, I've attended every public town meeting regarding this issue since the fall of 2017, and my perception of these proposals put forth by the Board of Education and the Department of Parks and Recreation has been rushed and poorly thought out in terms of its impact on the various parties involved. Now, why do I see it that way? Let me explain. Number one, when I presented data on the carcinogenic effect of diesel fuel exhaust during an earlier P&Z meeting, the Board of Education quickly backtracked during that same meeting and said that they can use electric power instead, utilizing electric cables across the fields to power the lights. When questioned about the dangers of tripping over these electric cords, the Board of Education, Department of Parks and Recreation responded by saying they would bury the cords in the ground, to which one of the P&Z committee members, Nick Macri, responded by saying, well, that response was indicative of placing permanent rather than temporary lights, for which the application was filed for. In addition, given the extension of the daylight due to the daylight savings time in March, it was felt that the proposal put forth was not worth the effort and expense, and therefore was denied by the P&Z committee. Now, given that the Board of Education and Department of Parks and Recreation plans keep on changing multiple times during this meeting, when confronted with various questions, it seemed to suggest that there was a lack of in-depth research and planning for this problem. Since then, the Board of Education and Department of Parks and Recreation have moved on to further proposals regarding turfing and high schooling of the middle school athletic fields, specifically Central Middle School, despite neighborhood concerns of traffic congestion and the safety of mixing high school and middle school students, especially in light of the Florida and the more recent Maryland high school shootings. There's been no traffic safety study done around Central Middle School. There's been no data presented by the Board of Education, Department of Parks and Recreation regarding the proposed schedule of uses of the Central Middle School fields on an annual school basis when asked by us, and also as required by a resolution passed by the P&Z Committee on February 15, 2005, regarding the use of the high school athletic fields. Have they considered more cost-effective alternatives that do not involve middle school fields? There's no rush to make this happen right away, especially if it's not done in a well-thought-out, well-organized, and well-researched manner. Based on this year's recent performance of Greenwich High School athletes who have won state or county championships and a near championship in football, there should be no rush to do something ASAP, especially if by doing so, without a well-thought-out and researched approach, will end up wasting taxpayer dollars. A recent Greenwich Time article mentioned that the town may be giving its residents a nice present this year in the form of no mill rate increase. There will be no present for town residents in the future if a rushed approach ends up wasting taxpayer dollars and money. There's a saying in our field, in the medical field, that rushing a patient's visit will lead to a misdiagnosis and then hurting the patient. Please do not allow or fund any rushed, non-well thought out proposals to hurt the Greenwich taxpayer. Thank you.
Brian Tooney will be after Erica Smith. She's not here. Okay. Then Brian Tooney, followed by Leanne Tell.
Hello, I'm Brian Tunney, and I'm a resident on Orchard Street and been a town resident for 25 plus years. Similar to what Arthur said, I don't believe that we should appropriate $300,000 to look at the field, specifically Central Middle School field, where originally the proposal was to look at all the middle school fields in town. I believe, as you've heard, there are many health and safety issues with commingling middle school children with high school children. The traffic around Central right now is challenged. Try to get from Orchard Street to the Post Road, which used to be a 2 or 3 minute drive, is now a minimum of 10 to 15 minutes anytime around school and opening, school closing and opening. The reason I believe that we're looking at this now is because of the school time change, and that's something that, as Arthur said, it was, I'm sure, debated, rushed, but you ask any parent that has a preschool child that is trying to get from Riverside to Greenwich, which used to be a 15-minute drive, is now a half an hour to 45 minutes, and they're getting late to work. I agree that we should improve the infrastructure of the high school. I believe that Cardinal Stadium needs a lot of work. I believe also that the fields in and around the high school should be the priority. Moving high school sports to a middle school, I don't think is an appropriate response. Currently, Central Middle School is used every night in spring and fall and every weekend by different various sports activities throughout town. And they are used. I mean, you know, so they're being used by the appropriate people. Typically, on a Monday or Tuesday afternoon, it's 10-year-olds using the field, not high schoolers. So I thank you very much for your time, and thank you.
We'll have Jude Branstein after Leanne.
Good evening. My name is Leanne Tell, and I'm speaking as a resident that lives behind Central Middle School. We've heard tonight that the BOE needs the requested funds to support our students and teachers, and I fully support that with one exception. The line item for $300,000 for a feasibility study for Central Middle School fields is not something we need. Peter Tessie proposed $300,000 for a feasibility study for our 3 middle schools. Central has now been picked by the BOE, so I'm curious what the $300,000 is being spent on. As you heard about the poor state of our high school fields and sports facilities, wouldn't this money be better spent there to update our current facilities, what we already have? I am a supporter of sports in this town, and I just think we need to be spending our money wisely. Thank you.
Warren Silver will follow Jude.
Good evening. My name is Jude Braunstein, and I live at 300 Orchard Street in Greenwich, Connecticut. I'm a mom, I'm a sports fan, and I'm a taxpayer. There's something that has gone fundamentally wrong with the system when taxpayer money is earmarked for one purpose and is then repurposed without so much as a misstep. And this may be about to happen tonight. Mr. Tessie approved a $300,000 feasibility study to identify a suitable field for high school practices, games, and other purposes. And the BOE voted amongst themselves to repurpose these funds to do a feasibility study specifically about Central Middle School. I do not believe for a minute that Mr. Tessie said to the Board of Education, here's $300,000, do with it what you will. Nor do I believe that he said, feasibility study or whatever. No, he said this $300,000 is a feasibility study to identify a field suitable within the town. Now, in the grand scheme of a multi-million-dollar budget, $300,000 is probably not a whole lot of money to you. but it is to us, and what it represents is even more valuable. Therefore, I am requesting that you deny the Board of Education's request to use the $300,000 budget item as they see fit, but rather use it for the purpose for which it was intended. Thank you.
Rosemary, sorry, I can't read the last name. We'll follow Warren.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here also in support of denying the $300,000 feasibility study at Central Middle School. Warren Silver. Just to reiterate on what I said earlier, I was at the capital budget when Mr. Tessie allocated that $300,000, and that $300,000 was specifically allocated to identify a field within the town that is going to be least disruptive to neighborhood, that's going to take into consideration noise, it's going to take into consideration traffic, it's going to take into consideration neighborhoods, and he did not specify that it's going to be used at a specific school. And so if you're going to take that $300,000, that $300,000 should be used in line with the wishes of Mr. Tessie and the town, as opposed to being specifically allocated by the Board of Education to Central Middle School. If they've made their decision to go ahead with Central Middle School, they don't need the $300,000. Second of all, this Board of Education needs to be held accountable. I realize that the Board of Education doesn't get paid for their services, but the reality is they have a fiduciary responsibility to all residents in Greenwich as to how they spend the taxpayers' money. This $300,000 is a precursor to spend tens of millions of dollars on fixing up fields. What we have seen with this Board of Education is they're always in a rush to do things. So I find it completely remarkable that they went ahead and they figured out that it's going to cost the town $1.5 million for late start time, yet they failed to consider that if they're going to have late start time, it's going to have a knock-on effect on daylight, on sporting, and now they're coming back to the town saying, because of late start time, which is only going to cost $1.5 million, well, now we need to go spend another $5 to $10 million on fields because the kids can't play the sports. So my point is they need to slow down, they need to have well thought out plans instead of rushing into things in discrete matter. They need to be able to think beyond being incremental and take the bigger picture into consideration. The third point is, why do we have to keep on building when we can just rent? The reality is that this is really for a short period of the year, and so if this is to ensure that the kids aren't hurt when they're playing at night, is there no option to rent fields from other parties instead of having to spend tens of millions of dollars of taxpayers' money all the time for a very short season when they need the fields at night? So I'm urging the BET to slow down the process. Let's wait for Western Middle School's remediation to be done, because we may end up with another big remediation at Central Middle School, which is going to cost another millions of dollars and it's going to have more time delay. And let's wait for that remediation to be done. Let's do a proper feasibility study of all the fields in Greenwich to figure out which is going to be least disruptive to neighborhoods and all the things that Tessie requested. Thank you very much. Good night.
We'll have Paul Colligan after Rosemary.
I'm so short and the mic is so tall. Good evening, everyone, the Board of Estimate and Taxation. I thank you for your time, and believe me, we have put in a lot of time on this. I am here to persuade you to deny the $300,000 feasibility study requested by Central. I support all of my neighbors. I have lived in Greenwich 50 years. I live on Coach Lamp Lane for 38 years. All 5 of my children have gone to Central and to the high school, to Tufts, to Cornell, to Stanford University. We have professors, we have 2 doctorates, well educated in Greenwich. My children at the high school were in classes of 29 students. They were in cubicles, they were in outbuildings, and they were well educated, so I'm so appreciative of that. Apparently, the BOE has decided to use the money at their discretion. They have not conferred with anyone and have just made this decision in a work session, which you can see on YouTube, if you wish. There should be priorities before they make a decision. Regarding Central alone, There should have been first a soil analysis. This is a wet field. They should address the severe drainage problem on that field. Walk in a dry season, wear boots. A traffic study should have been done by professionals during prime school time. That is, when classes start, when classes end, when classes are in session because parents, are going back and forth. When students walk to and from their homes, they have to cross a dangerous Orchard Street, they cross the field of Central, they cross a dangerous Indian Rock Lane and a dangerous Stanwich Road to the high school. Okay. They should do the traffic study during the rush hours in early evening when school teams are finishing. They should do a full scope of automobile and pedestrian traffic on the main parallel arteries of traffic. In Orchard Street on one side of Central, Stanwich Road on the other side, leading to the Post Road. These are two main arteries. They are dangerous roads. Okay. We have had accidents on these roads. Data must be presented in total transparency by professionals, not just by speakers that the Board of Ed might provide. If Central is chosen, then the lack of sidewalks must also be considered for Upper Orchard Street, as well as the attendant removal of trees, of neighbors' concerns about their properties if trees are removed and sidewalks installed. Okay. To allocate monies for a study to choose a site for overflow high school sports teams when the BOE has already chosen a site without due diligence is an irresponsible and wasteful use of taxpayer money. Thank you very much and for your patience.
Paul Colligan, followed by Denise Savinjo.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board. My name is Paul Colligan. I am a 26-year resident of town, which makes me a newbie, I guess. And this is my first BET forum. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My thoughts and comments today are going to be about the security of the Greenwich High School in town. And I just would like to read a couple short bits. One from an op-ed from a junior at Greenwich High School after their protest rally on March 14th. We can all agree that no one should go through school scared for their life. That was the student body president, Greg Goldstein, who was quoted in the paper. There's a march happening in Washington, and a group of Connecticut students from Newtown are heading down to meet with those from Florida. The group of students who were in fourth grade at Sandy Hook School in 2012. When these now Newtown High School students meet their peers from Florida, from the school where a gunman massacred 17 students and staff on Valentine's Day, unfortunately, they will be in a unique position to understand the horror of hearing gunfire in classrooms and the terror of seeing friends run for their lives. As a parent of 3 children who have attended our town schools for the past 22 years, and for 10 years and hopefully 12 total at Greenwich High School, I would like to speak about the poorest condition and insufficient security at Greenwich High School, given the world that we are living in today. I have spoken over the past few years to many Greenwich High School parents, current and former officers of our police department, as well as professionals from the safety and security industry. Our high school is not secure, which makes it unsafe and a target. My understanding is that Greenwich High School is the most densely populated building in our entire town of Greenwich. Approximately 3,000 people, students, faculty, and staff on campus on any particular day. We can remember back to Columbine and Newtown and Parkland and Great Mills High this week, and we can shed tears for those families. But if our attitude is it can't happen here, not in Greenwich, our community and our leaders are being naive or ignorant. Professionals I have spoken to have suggested to improve the safety at the high school, there should be 3 or 4 armed security officers, or what are referred to as SROs, on campus. We have one currently, and we have one in training, I understand, who will be the replacement for his retirement. They have also suggested a police substation along the hillside road when approaching campus, whether I assume it would be on the campus, not in the road, because that's a whole other issue that people are dealing with. I don't have the answers, but I like the professionals' suggestions. I also know, as a taxpayer reviewing the proposed town budget of some $426 million and a police budget excluding their benefits of $22 million, that there is a way to find the money required to add an additional 2 or 3 officers. Maybe it's 200,000 or 300,000, you will know better than I, but it's doable. Maybe resources can be redeployed from the now unnecessary traffic officers on the avenue to the high school, as suggested by current and former officers from our police force. What I do know is that we and you do not want Greenwich to make the headline news for a tragedy that has happened in so many other communities. I ask that you take action to increase and improve the security of this campus in your deliberations of this current budget, and work with alacrity to ensure it is implemented for the fall of 2018. I am happy to share any additional thoughts that I have, of which there are many, with any of the members of the committee at any time. Thank you for listening, and I pray that you take action.
We will have Eric Brower following Denise Savigno.
Good evening, members of the BET. I'm Denise Savageau. I'm a resident of Greenwich at 72 Oak Ridge Street. I'm a have 30 years experience in environmental planning, 20 years of which I served as the conservation director for the town of Greenwich and retired as of March 1st. I'm here to ask you to support the Conservation Commission budget proposed by the Conservation Commission, which includes funding for 3 full-time staff. And indeed, that's the position of the Conservation Commission. In their letter dated February 21st, they said the Conservation Commission remains convinced that a full-time staff of 3, led by a senior staff director, is necessary to address all of the environmental conservation issues facing the town of Greenwich. The proposal by the Conservation Commission increases staffing hours by 10 hours a week by making the part-time staff full-time. Besides increasing the hours, which are sorely needed or dearly needed in terms of with the amount of workload, it's very inefficient to have a professional staff person at the LIUNA level constantly turning over. This position has turned over multiple times since it was created, with an average of less than 2 years, somebody staying in that position, which means you're constantly having to train someone, fill the position, whatever, and that's very inefficient. The Conservation Commission workload keeps increasing. Energy efficiency and energy planning is key for our town. I think we've missed out many opportunities for saving quite a lot of dollars by not being as aggressive as we can, where, there's a lot of towns doing a lot more than Greenwich, Fairfield, West Hartford, towns similar demographics to ours that are leading the way in energy efficiency and alternative energy, and we should be moving forward with that. When you're looking at the water conservation and the work we need to do on water supply planning, and we know that that's becoming more and more critical as we move forward. If you want to protect land values in Greenwich, we really need to protect land, the water supply, and that's a key part of the workload that continues to increase for the Conservation Commission. Resiliency planning in terms of climate change and sea level rise is another place that the Conservation Commission has taken the lead. And again, protecting the town's infrastructure, and I'm going to get into that in a second, but it's really important. So when you're looking at the benefits of the work the Conservation Commission does in terms of protecting land values and protecting other assets of the town, I think your bang is for your buck. The first selectman budget seeks to reduce the land use budget by consolidating and eliminating the Conservation Director's position and the Inland Wetland Director's position, and basically reducing staff hours collectively by 25 hours for those two agencies, reducing the Conservation Commission budget by 7.5 hours and the Inland Wetland staff hours by 17.5 hours. Again, the Conservation Commission is looking at a 10-hour-a-week increase, and as the former conservation director, I'm not really sure how they're going to be able to get the work done. I am not against consolidation of the departments, but certainly it shouldn't be done because of budgetary reasons. There's ways to consolidate, and a proposal was put in front of folks to look at that, which reorganized staff but didn't eliminate staff, and I urge you to take that approach and look and see what you need to do. And the last thing I just want to put in is that from a CIP perspective, there's a proposal before you to do an assessment of impacts of sea level rise on town infrastructure. This is a critical piece that I urge you also to fund. Thank you.
We will have Arlene Lamazzo following Eric Brower.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. My name is Eric Brower. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Conservation Commission. I've been on the Commission for 22 years. My statement tonight will be brief. Bill Rutherford, our Chairman, was not able to be here tonight, so I'm going to read briefly a memo that he has addressed to the Chair and all of you members. From William Rutherford. The purpose of this memo is to provide an update to my February 21st, 2018 letter to you regarding the First Selectman's proposed 2018-2019 budget - Conservation and Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. The position of the Conservation Commission, as stated in that letter, which consisted of a unanimous vote, including members of both political parties, voted in favor of the proposed budget with the previously mentioned caveat. A key component of that budget is the elevation of the Conservation Resource Manager's position from part-time to full-time. Subsequently, I met with Eric Brower, Vice Chairman, Brian Harris, Chairman of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency, and Mary Pepe, Human Resources Director, to develop a mutually agreed-upon final draft of the job description for the Director of Environmental Affairs position. I have copies of this if you'd like it.
John Lipman will follow Arlene.
Madam Chair and members of the board, I'm Arlene Lamazzo. I live in Old Greenwich. I'm speaking as an individual and not as chair of the RTM Public Works Committee. As one who lived in Old Greenwich since 1965, I have lived through and experienced more than 4 decades of increased local residential and commercial traffic, in addition to Stamford employees who use Old Greenwich as a cut-through to get to work at Cummings Point in Stamford. Traffic has spiraled from a couple of hundred cars per day when I moved here using Sound Beach Avenue to the current 1,700 cars daily. The flower pot, quote unquote, which functions as a small rotary, has become emblematic of the quote, charm of Old Greenwich, as is the, quote, tree at Forest Avenue. While we all value the aesthetic beauty of Binney Park, the Perrott Library, and Kitchell Nature Preserve at this intersection, to say nothing of the quaint charm of the village, the time has come to face reality. There are 8 lanes of traffic that merge at the, quote, rotary, I call it the flower pot, going in 8 different directions. It's only reasonable to address the need for a traditional rotary that will be both more functional and more clearly understood and more safe. Cars which have to slow down in order to maneuver around or feed into the proposed rotary in an organized manner will make it clearer to the driver who has the right-of-way. A typically sized rotary is easily understood by drivers who follow the rules of the road. What we have now are striped lines in an unusual pattern to guide motorists around the flower pot in a rather cramped and narrow lane going north on Sound Beach Avenue. Those who live in town have learned how to manage this location, but not everyone does. In addition, pedestrians who do get the corner of Harding Road often become confused when they try to cross Sound Beach Avenue to get to Binney Park or to the library. I've seen pedestrians try to cross Sound Beach Avenue just north of Forest Avenue, not knowing where the crosswalks are. They often have frightened looks on their faces because they know they're crossing a street that has 2 lanes of fast traffic and no walkway signs. The Rotary will make the pedestrian crossings clear when they're placed in 4 obvious locations. Most of the appeals that I have heard, which I did at the public hearing recently at P&Z, implored the town to keep, quote, the charm of Old Greenwich as it is now. The village in this area will be just as charming even if the flower pot were removed. What remains of the existing intersection that has not changed is the confluence of all these lanes of traffic moving without a steady flow. The southbound lane of traffic must come to a totally full stop, a complete standstill, in order to make a turn to the left of the flower pot onto Ladens Rock Road, or those going to Harding Road, or turning left to Ladens Rock. These motorists have to wait at a standstill while streams of cars go north, turning around this little flower pot, treating it as if they're right of way. Drivers have to be on guard to anticipate who will have the right of way, since there's not any clear order. It's almost like a Russian roulette. The other issue which emerged at the last meeting at P&Z was that a rotary would be acceptable if only it was reduced in size. As you know, there are federal and state guidelines that dictate the width of driving lanes, as well as the widths of how much room motorists need to make the turns that a rotary requires to accommodate the existing volume of traffic. Also, you know about the need to allow for reasonable turning radii. When residents become engineers, I think it is fair to say that they're unqualified. Knowing how much attention has been given to in detail by both the Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Jim Michael, and the Chief Engineer, Mrs. Gabriela Sircosta-Cohi, to every facet of this project, I have every faith that as professional engineers, they know exactly what's required to make this rotary work. The goal of the rotary is to make the traffic flow more smoothly, more orderly, and most important of all, to make it safer, both for motorists and pedestrians. This project is basically a public safety project, which should have priority at this location over a flower pot. The charm of Binney Park, the stunning federal architecture of the library, the trees surrounded by the plantings of Forest Avenue will continue to highlight the beauty of entering the charming village of Old Greenwich. The charm remains. I urge you to approve the design of the Sound Beach, I call Bridge project. Thank you.
Sabine Schoenberg will be after John Lippman.
Good evening. I'm John Lippman. I'm the president of the Round Hill Volunteer Fire Company. I'm also a resident of Buckfield Lane in Backcountry. And I wanted to come talk to you and give you an update about our recent budget for this fiscal year that we're in. The committee in town approved $100,000. We recently, on February 18th, have an agreed to plan and use of funds for architectural and engineering and design. The Round Hill Firehouse, for those that don't remember or aren't familiar, was started in 1948 by 3 families in the backcountry area to supplement and service first responder needs in the backcountry. Today we have 40 members, 10 official firefighters, 8 that are red tag members that can go on calls and respond not just for fires but other, natural disasters. An example is March 2nd. I know that we had a nor'easter. I was coming back from Boston and got stuck and had to drive for 6 miles. It took me an hour and 30 minutes because of an accident on the Merritt. and over a 3-day period of time, we responded to 37 calls. A lot of these were down trees, power lines in the backcountry area. Round Hill, in some cases, was the closest and only, fire truck or house that could get there in time. We, direct traffic, pulled out a chainsaw, got people out of their driveways, and, kept people safe. There's a lot of information out there that if you hit a down wire with your car, you can die. So there's a lot of needs and services that we provide in the backcountry area. We're here to supplement everything else that the other first responders, the Greenwich Fire Department, is doing. We're just there, we're close, and the house is in disrepair. It is not to code. There has not been any capital put into the house in quite some time. The house not only provides service to the local community, but we also have some dorm rooms where we want to have full-time volunteers living in the house during the day and having different shifts where we have people that can go on more calls. So the purpose is not only to update the house, get it to code, which it is not, but also to increase our membership, make sure that we have more people that are members that are responding, more people that are living in the house, so that in the middle of the night, if there's a call, someone is going there and is going to be the first person if it's a fire or something, car accident. So we have a budget. Plan is that we have hired Shoreline Design. We are building a plan, 3 different drawings that we will have. Over the next few years, we'll be able to execute on that plan, build the house. It's a 50-50 partnership between the house and the town. The house is a nonprofit, so we live off of funds that the town gives us and also our local community and supporters and people like myself that live nearby. So our plan is for our 50%. We are going to spend the next year or so fundraising, doing fundraisers, talking about the house, the service it provides to our friends and family and neighbors, and we have lots of other levers to pull. We could take out a mortgage on the house, which we do not have. So I wanted to thank you for the funds, and I look forward to reporting on the progress over the coming years. Thank you.
Gerald Pollack will follow Sabine Schoenberg.
I'm Sabine Schoenberg. This is a shift in subjects. I'm the co-president of Think Greenwich, your PR initiative, which you funded last year in the last budget cycle. And I'm here today to request your support for the next budget, again, for $30,000. As you know, the $30,000 town budget is actually the smallest portion of the fees. We received tremendous support from private individuals and the business community toward this effort. And you will actually, we've heard from the Finance Committee, your subcommittee, that you wish to see more budget information. That and more specific metrics are coming to you in your inbox, hopefully tomorrow or Saturday. So we want to give you the most recent information that we can provide so you can evaluate our effort. What we have said when we started this is that the campaign aims to do a number of things. It really wants to put Greenwich into a light that shows what we really have to offer in this town, which is tremendous. The second thing is, you may recall our conversations around the Barry Sternlicht very negative comment, which was very unfounded in many ways, and there was really no public or no voice to really discuss it in any way at the time. So it just sort of stood out there and raced around the globe in literally 4 days. So it cast a very, very negative image, falsely, I would say, on Greenwich. Just this past week, here's how the PR agency that we were able to hire has worked. We were able to find out that a reporter for Forbes magazine wanted to do a similarly negative article on Greenwich, something to the effect of hedge funds, financial services, and wealthy individuals leaving Greenwich. we were able to work with that reporter and show the facts. That story, and you will have that in your email, became a story of billionaires are still choosing to live in Greenwich. It was a complete reversal. So instead of a negative story sitting out there, negative press sells, we were able to really, with the facts, turn it into a positive piece. There are a number of the other publications, newspapers, that wanted to pursue a similar track, and Greenwich, as we all know, are a little bit of a target. The state of Connecticut is not in the best of all shapes, so these kinds of stories are really out there, and our agency is really working one by one to talk about the facts and the realities and turn the sort of negative hoopla that doesn't exist into real facts. So you will see that tomorrow. You will see our budget information with that as well. The budget is in fine shape. I just want to remind you, as we've said time and time again, we came from ground zero. There was no thinking, no foundation laid to this effort. We had to spend a lot of time. We're here a little over 6 months into this effort, and we frankly need a little more time. You will see in the information that we're now coming into the ramp-up phase. We've had tremendous amount of ground-laying work that has been done, and that is now starting to translate over. I thank you for your support.
We'll have Despina Fasuliotis following Gerald Pollack.
He's not here.
Oh, sorry, okay.
My name is Despina Fasuliotis. I'm on the RTM in District 11, but I am here tonight speaking as an individual. I am here to support the First Selectman's request to combine the Director of Conservation and Director of Inland Wetlands to one position as Director Environmental Affairs. As I understand it, this request will result in the elimination of a head count while retaining both Inland Wetlands and the Conservation Departments. The environmental director would be reporting to both the Conservation Commission and Inland Wetlands. This makes sense for both departments. There will be a synergy between the departments and will enable efficiencies. The BET should support this change. As a proponent of adhering to the BET guidelines, I also support a reduction in the Board of Education budget by the amount needed to meet the BET budget guidelines of a 2.4% increase. It is time that the BET has a serious discussion with the BOE on their budget. It is a topic that I know is at the forefront of many towns, especially in light of what is happening in our schools all over the nation. But Greenwich should begin that conversation. As a former teacher for 35 years, I support excellence in education, but with a budget of more than $150 million, the Board of Education should find it in their budget to at least adhere to the BET guidelines. Please support this change.
Peter Berg, followed by Henry Orphis.
Good evening. My name is Peter Berg. I am chairman of the RTM Land Use Committee, but I'm just here as an RTM member. I am a former BET member, so I know the terrific amount of work and time that you put into this job, and I want to thank you for that. So last month when I read in the paper that you're now proposing a zero increase in the mill rate, it occurred to me that that's not a very worthy accomplishment. And particularly if to do that you're taking money from the fund balance. I would suggest that instead you go back to increasing the mill rate and use it to improve our quality of life. I noticed that one of the accounts that land use tracks is our code 312, which is streets and bridges. In that code, there is a $0 for sidewalks, not just for this year, but all the way through the year 2024. There is $0 for safe routes, traffic calming. There was money in that account several years ago. It's just disappeared. There's no money for the implementing the bicycle master plan. There used to be money for that. There's an acronym in land use called SPLOTS. You know what SPLOTS stands for? It stands for Strategic Plans Lying on the Shelf. And you know, we have lots of strategic plans lying on our shelves in Greenwich. And I mentioned the open space plan. You know, we have an open space plan with a very ambitious goal, but we've made no progress on that in recent years. We were proud that we acquired Pomerantz Tuckman property and the Babcock property, but that was back around the year 2000. And you know, properties in mid-country and back-country, they're being sold at a big discount compared with recent years. And if you want more sports playing fields, there are open spaces available. And so I would challenge the assumptions you may be making. You know, nearly 30%, I think it's now over 30% of our households are tenants. They're not homeowners. They're insulated from the mill rate. Many homeowners have had increases in household income that far outstrip the mill rate increases. For them, property taxes have become increasingly affordable. My wife and I are both retired, but we're empty nesters, so our expenses have gone way down. For us, property taxes are very affordable. The only group that's really under pressure, perhaps, are seniors who are living on fixed income, some just on Social Security. But for those you've got a senior tax credit program, I would suggest it's far too skimpy. Fund that, and then you can increase the mill rate by some and improve our quality of life. You should be alarmed by the fact that the state is projecting that the population of Greenwich is going to drop by 20% by the year 2040. That's a very alarming finding. If you haven't looked at that projection, it's an extremely professional projection. It is the official projection. There's one for every town in Connecticut. You can find it at the Yukon OMB site. And you should be trying to figure out right now what we need to do to avoid that population collapse. So in summary, I just urge you to increase the budget. Don't invade the fund balance. Study that demographic issue. I would say, make my day, raise my taxes.
We'll have Karen Mendelson following Henry Orfis.
Henry Orfis, RTM member from District 7, my first time appearing here, and I will have to take the opposite view from the gentleman who just spoke and said, make my day by raise my taxes. I'm here to urge the BET to stick to the guidelines that were approved last October. Those guidelines are designed to keep the town operating efficiently, limit budget increases, and be careful with our capital spending. Many people tonight have spoken about the merits of the various spending items in the budget, and rightfully so. What I'd like you all to do is think for a minute in making your decision about the people who have to pay for all that budget. As all you know, I'm sure most of you know at least, the federal tax law has changed and we can no longer deduct all of our property tax. We're limited to $10,000 a year. Now, the state is considering legislation to try to get around that by letting people donate their property taxes to the town and get a full tax credit. Unfortunately, the Treasury Secretary who oversees the IRS has publicly said he will not accept this and that end run will not work. So I reached out, being a tax lawyer myself, to our elected representatives and to the Commissioner of Revenue to see if they had any magic to share with me about how we could actually make this work, so that the net out-of-pocket after-tax cost to our citizens of funding this budget would essentially be the same as it had been in prior years. there was no great magic. The response that I received on Tuesday of this week, in addition to being a site to a very lengthy scholarly article by a bunch of law professors who said that they thought a portion of property taxes could still be retained as deductible. I'll not bore anyone with the details. Was a comment from the commissioner that he was going to propose a change to the Senate Bill 11 that would let a portion of our taxes continue to be deductible. And it just seems to me that given that the net out-of-pocket cost we're all going to have to pay for the budget is going to go up as a result of federal tax law, that we need to be very, very careful in looking at what we're spending money on and how efficiently we're operating. And in particular, it seems to me this is not the time to embark on major new capital spending projects, given that we don't know what percentage of our property tax contributions will be deductible in the future. The law will become clarified eventually, but I'd urge prudence in certainly in any major capital spending at this time. I'm also a little bit troubled by the increase in headcount on the Board of Education side in excess of the number of students that are projected to increase. I'm not that familiar with all the details, but that just doesn't seem like a normal thing to me. So, thank you.
We'll have Steve Bruce following Kara Mendelson.
Okay, good evening, members of the BET. My name is Kara Mendelson. I grew up here and went to Old Greenwich Eastern and Greenwich High. I am a PTA co-president at North Manor School, but I am speaking tonight as an individual. I have 4 kids, 3 that attend North Manus and 1 that will be a kindergartner next year. I am here in support of the Board of Education's proposed budget. I've been to the Board of Education meetings over the past few months as they've whittled the budget down to what it is, and there's no excess in it. I have been impressed with the way the Board of Ed worked together across party lines to ultimately unanimously support the proposed budget. Through my experience volunteering at North Manus, I have gotten a very close look at how the teachers and administrators work. We have amazing teachers and administrators. They give 110% all the time. Many put in 12-hour days and are still smiling and looking to do more. They love what they do and they pour their heart and souls into it. With that said, classes can be very diverse and challenging. Within one elementary school classroom, you can have students reading 2 grade levels below grade level and others reading 3 grade levels above. That is a difference of 5 grade levels within one classroom, and that's the norm. This type of environment poses a real challenge for teachers and is just one example of why personalized learning is necessary and the way forward. Dr. Gilday is an expert in this area and is a tremendous leader. I think it is time for Greenwich to come together as a town to support her, our administrators, and our teachers. They know what is best for our kids and our town, and I hope that you will support the budget as they have proposed. And just with respect to the Central Field feasibility study, I was at the most recent Board of Ed meeting, and they did not vote to go ahead with turfing Central. That's not right. They voted to see if Central might be an option. They may very well find that there is too much traffic or something else and decide that Central is not a good option. They are trying to avoid working hastily and making a big mistake by choosing Central without doing proper research, but they need the funds in the budget to do the research. Thank you.
Mindy Smith will follow Stephen Bruce.
Good evening, and thank you for your service. Tonight I'd like to talk about something that I wasn't really aware of until this Sunday when I picked up the newspaper and learned about the internal town auditor and political interference with her job. And it would seem to me that at this moment, when a group like this is dependent upon clean audits, free of political interference, that this should actually make everyone alarmed. That we have to read about this, that we hear about how town officials are giving draft internal reports to unelected officials to exert influence about the reports. That is alarming, it's scary, and it shouldn't be happening. We have to protect the individuals in those jobs. And it's really important because we can't trust the information if there's going to be political influence exerted by town officials on those auditors. So hopefully this group will protect that auditor, make sure that we're getting clean audits, that there aren't unelected officials going in talking to town officials, seeking to influence the outcomes. That is not good government, it's not good governance, and it raises questions about how the information that you all get to do your jobs well is being prepared. So I would ask and hope that everyone would seek to protect the auditor, to do the right thing, and to ensure that down the road, that job remains free of any political interference, and that it's called out when it occurs. Because that is how we protect the public good, that's how we protect the budget, and that's how you all can get to do your job better. So thank you.
We have, is Arthur Yee still here? Because he put in 2 slips, so I'll assume he's not speaking again.
Hi. My name is Mindy Smith, and I represent District 1 on the RTM. Like others, I had not planned on speaking this evening. I was here simply as a member of the Education Committee. But I want to join my fellow parents of special needs students in asking that the BET take a close look at how the Board of Education is spending money on litigation and settlements. My entire career has been dedicated to education. I support public schools, and I was proud to send my daughter to Julian Curtis when she started kindergarten in 2014. However, I've spent the majority of her time over the past 4 years fighting for her to be educated. When she was in the 2nd grade, she was outplaced to a school an hour away, despite suffering from crippling separation anxiety. Now, as a 3rd grader, she is on homebound education, as Julian Curtis is unable to find appropriate placement for her. This has become an enormous financial burden on my husband and I, as only one of us can work at a time. But similar to Mr. Fisher, I have some resources that have helped me fight for her education. In our case, our resources is expertise. As an educator, I know our rights, and so I fight. But I have learned firsthand that the official method of operation for the special education team seems to be to fight services, outplace, and if all else fails, go to court. I have learned this from speaking to other families in town. The stories you've heard this evening are not anomalies. In fact, it was these stories that motivated me to run for the RTM in the first place. But a member of the special education team also accidentally showed her hand at a recent meeting. I was fighting for something I knew was within our legal right, and I won. And I was told, "You're lucky. We could make you sue us for it. And would that be worth it?" I implore the BET to closely examine the special education leadership in Greenwich. For those of you looking to cut the budget, the nearly $5 million budgeted for litigation seems like a good place to start. Thank you.
Are there any other people that would like to address the BET? Okay, can you give us your name? Come on down. Anyone else? Okay, we'll take Mr. Quigley after.
Molly Salibi, District 8 RTM. I'm here overall to speak in favor of the Board of Education budget. I feel guidelines are just guidelines. They're not mandates. We have a new superintendent. We should trust her confidence, her budgeting skills, let her do her job. I haven't had a chance yet to go line by line over everything, but I've attended lots of meetings. I actually have mixed feelings about the feasibility study, the $300,000. I'm sensitive to the neighbors. I also feel that it's just trying to delay solving an issue that we have at Greenwich High School with lights, et cetera, and so I'm not sure that the answer is any of the middle school fields. But overall, I support the budget. The Cardinal Stadium feasibility study, absolutely. My family's been paying taxes in this town for 52 years. The public schools are in terrible condition. Capital improvements need to be made. Schools, town buildings, whatever it might be. And when you do start going line by line, and this isn't to pick on any one thing, but I don't think we need to spend $30,000 on a PR campaign for Greenwich. Greenwich is known internationally. And that $30,000 could go for a new set of doors to the swimming pool at Greenwich High School. We have a Class A swim water polo, and the doors are rusted and drafty, and it's embarrassing. So, you know, that's really it. I just ask you to consider. And as a lifelong resident, I'm new to the RTM, but my father was on it, and I've followed things closely. I read all the newspapers. I try to attend as many meetings as I can. And, you know, we have these $1 million budgets, and we go around and we look mostly, and a lot of our things are just really not in good shape. So I'm not in favor of cutting capital expenditures or delaying, deferring to a new year, whatever was in the budget. So I guess that's about it. And if educators say they need additional headcount, give them what they need. Thanks.
Mr. Quigley? Can you please go behind the podium so we can pick it up on the mic?
If I can start right now. It's a little hard in 10 years of work that I've done to put it into 3 minutes, so I'm going to move very quickly. I'm Peter Quigley. I've spent 3 terms on the RTM, on the Budget Overview Committee and the Land Use Committee as a point person for water management, environmental concerns. We've put 10 years into the study of the flooding and drainage issue in this town. It is the elephant in this room. It is big time. So I want to take my 3 minutes. I've given you the notes of what I want to deal with quickly. Ms. Krummick has 5 documents of 12 copies each that are there to substantiate the scope of the problem. There seem to be people still denying that there's an issue in this town. I want to address that to them, but these documents, if you have a chance to read them, take a look. This is more just a casual conversation with you all because it does involve long-term investment in capital projects. And to Mr. Fisher's comments, this is a $250, $300 million elephant in the room here, okay? If you don't believe it, there are documents. Document 1 deals with Amy Siebert, who 2 years ago in 2016 admitted the town does not have the capacity to handle its sewer and storm drain systems on a commercial project on the Post Road. The Ironworks Tollgate project was actually 4 weeks ago. The neighbors won in the court. Decided in their favor that the commercial development could not be developed because the town does not have the capacity, clearly along the Post Road, to handle sewer and storm drains. The second document is a copy of the town website. If you don't think there's a stormwater, do you all think there's a stormwater management plan? Because it's on your website. It's on the Greenwich website. You can go there and find 9 watersheds, and to the tune of $200+ million, you will see the projects that have been recommended by experts, CDM, and it's right there. So I've given you a copy of how to get to that site. I've been in 3 meetings in the past month. It doesn't take experts to take a look around Greenwich and see the drainage and the flooding problems and also the contamination issues that are going on. You have to plan that kind of funds, and it has to come through various creative solutions, which you're all experts in. I've given you some ideas, but these ideas have been suggested for 10 years. The third document is the total summary of the Camp Dresser-McKee study that you'll find on the Greenwich website that totals $200 million. It does not include Mianus, which could be another $50 million, and clearly doesn't include the remediation that has been, quote, discovered over the last 3 or 4 years of some of these sites, particularly public sites where there's commercial and public municipal improvements that are being planned on contaminated sites. So somebody's got to pay for that. It can't come from your operating budget. Fourth document is a letter to the former chair of the BET, Mr. Michael Mason, Esquire. You'll note this was written in the January of 2011, okay? So I'm moving backwards here from 2016 to 2011 to January 2011, suggesting the solutions or some suggestions tonight that we did in 2011. And the final document you'll get will be how I joined the RTM, was on the Budget Overview Committee, and one of the members on the BET here and myself interviewed Amy Siebert, and you'll see a report to the Budget Overview Committee, for which Mr. Drake was a member, and for which Ms. Fasiliotis was a District 7 RTM colleague, for which we gave this report that 10 years later, this is not a $3 or $4 million 5-year project. Now, I apologize if you are planning now to up that kind of annual investment. Oh, he's giving me his 30 minutes. This is not a $3 or $4 million project. I read yesterday in the paper that you don't want to consider long-term funding of this issue. And if you want to prevent the flooding, the drainage, the contamination issues to be remediated, you must start to plan $15 million in addition to the $15 million that you plan for your sanitary sewers. Storm drains are separate than sanitary sewers. You'll see in my suggestions here, go to the charter, there's 30 pages of how to deal with sanitary sewers. And you're probably funding out, I think you are, as I looked at it, $20 million a year over 10 years to deal with sanitary sewers. Well, you need $15 million a year for a parallel storm drain system, because all stormwater does is flood the sanitary sewer system. So you're getting double the use of that system, which breaks down, and that's why some of these systems are imploding. Two issues, and why, and I'll give it up. You're going to say, why don't people come forward to this committee? And they haven't. Where is the Flood and Erosion Control Board? Go to your own website and ask them the question. This town floods with 1/2 inch of rain, and that's about every storm. They close the beaches. It's mandated that the beaches must close with 1/2 inch of rain. There are spots, over the last 3 weeks, we discussed them at Cos Cob and up in North Mianus. There are systems in this town that can't even take a 1-year storm, or a 2-year storm, or a 5-year storm, or a 10-year storm, and they come in talking 50 and 100-year storms. These systems break down. Ask the questions when they come forward. Write it down. Well, what about these 1-year storm critical points? What are you doing there? Ask them about the 1/2 inch of rain that's just about every storm. Why they closed the beaches? So you've got to ask the questions. I won't go through the suggestions I've made, but clearly bonds, similar to how you're funding for sanitary sewers, clearly has got to be a major choice. I also think there should be a mill rate tick, because it's a 9 watershed town-wide problem, so it has to be solved by the town. So there are some suggestions here. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. My understanding, Peg Freiberg wants to speak.
Peg Freiberg. I'm a member of the RTM, but I'm here in my personal capacity. I was not planning on speaking tonight. In fact, I didn't even know you all were meeting tonight. I came for a Claims Committee meeting, which ended earlier, so I couldn't resist coming by. But I'd just like to make a few responses to some of the remarks that have been made until now in various quarters on different topics. First of all, one speaker said that because it's predicted that our population over the next couple of decades will drop by 20%, we should spend more money. Excuse me? There are going to be fewer people to pay, therefore we ought to spend more? There's something wrong with that logic. Secondly, it was suggested that people who rent in town rather than owning their own houses are not affected by tax increases. Well, last time I rented, my landlord felt not at all uncomfortable about raising the rent when the landlord's taxes went up. So I would not say that the tenant portion of the Greenwich population is by any means insulated from the effect of property tax increases. I would also mention in passing that I've heard it said on more than one occasion by realtors in this town that prospects who are thinking about moving into Greenwich are more attracted by a relatively low tax rate than they are by this or that particular amenity. So plowing more and more money into fancier and fancier amenities at the cost of course, increasing taxes, will, if anything, discourage people from coming to town to offset the looming 20% population decrease. The other thing I'd like to head on is the issue of schools. One of the speakers was mentioning how the teachers have to deal with a spread of 5 grade levels in reading ability or whatever of students in one class, which is probably less than the old-fashioned teachers who had K through 8 used to deal with in their one-room classroom schools. And I appreciate our teachers. I think our teachers do a great job, and I appreciate their dedication. I am not, however, one who is going to shed crocodile tears for them because, folks, they are the highest paid teachers of any school system in the state of Connecticut. So if they do a good job, they should be, because they're paid to do a spectacular job. And the last thing I'd like to mention is the issue of capital improvements for school sports facilities, and in particular, the football stadium. What percent of the students at Greenwich High School play football, varsity football? First of all, we know it's less than 50 because half the school are female and can't play football even if they wanted to. We then now have to substantially ratchet down that 50% number because there are some people who are eggheads and are not interested in sports. We then have to ratchet it down more because there are many people who do sports, but they do swimming or diving or basketball or any of the dozens of other things available to them. So overall, the football players are a tiny, tiny fraction of the student body at Greenwich High School, and the amount of leverage that is being applied on their behalf, I think, is appalling, outrageous, and should not be accepted. Thank you.
Are there any other people who wish to speak? Then I think we've come to the end of our list.
So as we conclude our meeting, I'd like to thank all of you still in the room, those who spoke, those who came out, the staff who attended and stayed as well. We will be meeting on Monday in this room starting at 4 p.m. The roles will be reversed. We'll be speaking and attendees will be listening. And if you'd like to come and follow our decision session, please do. We really appreciate receiving your input. If anyone would like to stay and speak to individual BET members, please do that as well. And thank you. I'd like someone make a motion to adjourn. So moved. A second? Seconded. All in favor? Adjourned at 9:08. Thank you again.